my purpose is simply to hopefully intrigue you enough to track these down yourself and check them out.
I'll separate into each movie that you.
Yeah, I figure you cut out some of the chaff and everything, but yeah. So if I was giving you a list of Halloween movies, everything that we talked about that I said I didn't think sucked. Oh, there was one movie I did want to mention, give special shout out to because it's really interesting. And nobody, I think, in this country has really heard of it, other than us horror dorks.
Oh God, here's Sleepers.
Oh God, I hated Sleepers. That's not a horror movie, but I was horrified by it. No, I'm talking about this. It's a Chinese horror movie called Human Lanterns. Sometimes erroneously called Human Skin Lanterns, but I think the actual translation is Human Lanterns. This is an awesome movie.
It's very sick.
And it's really sick and twisted, but what's amazing about it is that it manages to be both an action movie. So it's a period piece set movie. It's set in like I forget what dynasty, but sometime in the long ago past of feudal China, and it's also a horror movie, but it's not. I mean, it's every kind of culture and country has its own take on horror. So in China, a lot of horror movies focus on things like Chinese mythology that don't necessarily translate to Western perspective because we don't have a frame of reference. So when you bring out hopping vampires, American audiences are just like, why are those vampires hopping? What is, and if you're Chinese and you grew up with those stories, it just makes sense to you. But it's not really cut from that cloth particularly. I would say just my take on Human Lanterns is that if it's imitating anything, it's cribbing from Italian horror. Like the work of like Mario Bava at the time, who was really talented and influential horror filmmaker, who actually kind of laid the groundwork for movies like Friday the 13th, with movies like Blood and Black Lace and Bay of Blood.
Human Lanterns, 1982.
Yep. So Human Lanterns, and the reason I say it reminds me of a Bava movie, I can't swear up and down that that's what he was, the director was thinking, but the color palette, the way that it's directed. What's interesting to me is that a lot of Chinese movies, particularly movies with action scenes in them, tend to be a lot more kinetic at this time. This movie has that. It's got kung fu fights in it, but it's also got these much more atmospheric and dark horror sequences. So there's a scene where this young woman is bathing down by a lake, and the killer of the movie is this psychotic lantern maker, and he's kind of this social reject guy, and he lives up in the mountains in this creepy hut, but he's renowned for making these astonishing lanterns of incredible beauty, like even emperors will commission him. Nobody knows what his secret is, and so he gets a commission to do like a lantern.
From the title.
Yeah, kind of gives it away in the title. But so he spies on this lady, and it's there's kind of like this little bit of a sleaze TNA factor. He's kind of like, hey. This guy, it must be said, the actor is Lo Li, if I'm pronouncing his name right. Terrific actor, was in a whole bunch of these sort of wuxia action movies at the time. But he makes a terrific villain. He sinks his teeth into the role beautifully. And he's a memorable villain. They give him this creepy sort of demon goblin mask to wear. And so there's these scenes of him jumping through the bamboo, this kind of wire work, but they film it in slow motion, and this creepy eyeless mask with this long hair that he's kind of swooping through the trees, and they kind of put this slow-mo on it, and he's just creepy as hell. The music is scary, and then he attacks this lady with this giant net, because he's going to capture her alive. And they have a kung fu battle, and she's got a sword, and she turns out to be a really badass fighter. And so there's this extended action scene, but then he manages to catch her in the net, and then we switch immediately back to horror. She wakes up in his dungeon, like in his hut, and he's got her chained up, and he's got her, the back of her exposed, and he's got this psycho knife thing, and he starts flaying her. And the movie does not pull any punches. It shows you this, and it's horrifying. And it's you'd think like, well, somebody's going to save her. It's an action movie. No, it's a horror movie. Nobody saves her. He just starts doing this, and she's like, and blood and skin comes off. And then the next shot is this weird sequence where he makes this lantern, and like he's got this gorgeous lantern, and the music's all haunting and weird. It's just this weird genre sort of mishmash of things. There's really no other movie I can think of that's quite like it, because it's at times somber and atmospheric and haunting and creepy and kind of a little bit sleazy, and it's got action in it and really memorable villain. It's visually a really beautiful movie too. Like the color palette, there's a lot of reds and blues and kind of a color scheme you don't normally think of from a Chinese movie at that time. So really interesting, kind of unique movie. Very downbeat and kind of grim, but highly recommended. Human Lanterns. Please check it out.
Yes. Definitely NC-17 though.
Yeah. Well, it's not for kids, obviously.
There's
pretty much none of these are.
You
could probably show Queer Duck the movie to kids.
Let's see how much is left in there.
I don't know.